That's okay.
Well, what do you want?
Welcome to week number 5 of our, well, actually week number 4, but 5 sounds better if you listen to, what's his name? Dan Cole, the Common Man. In the afternoon. What? Did you say something? Oh. I thought I recognized the voice. I hear a lot.
I bet you love to hear a lot.
Yes, that's what I meant to say. More on that later.
Yep.
Anyway, this is now our 4th in our series this fall. We have bumped Tim Hemquist into next year, but I'm really pleased that Paul Schafer agreed to be part of the My Calling series today, though I'm surprised that we're not seeing the real Paul this morning, because he has nothing on that says Milwaukee Brewers.
Attaboy.
It was a rough night last night.
Oh, was it? I didn't see score.
14-8.
Oh my gosh. 2 touchdowns.
Humbling.
Yeah.
Just like the Twins in Philadelphia the night before.
Yeah. Been there.
Anyway, Paul came to us a few years ago after he graduated from Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, with a degree in chemistry. And he started working for 3M at the time. And he and I had a piece of pie one night at Baker Square, and he expressed an interest in becoming a part of the congregation. And with the acknowledgement that his dad is an interim pastor, primarily in Iowa, although right now he's the interim pastor in Emmons, Minnesota, which is about a stone's throw from where Dave and Bonnie Davidson have moved. So, Paul, we're very appreciative of your being here this morning, and you're being with us full time, and we're all yours.
Okay. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Paul Schafer, not of the Tonight Show band. I don't know how many times I've heard that in my life. So this is my calling. I thought I'd start off with maybe a little bit of background about my parents and where I was born and things like that, since many of you probably don't know a lot about me. So I'm kind of a mystery. My dad...
Should we put dimmer lights on it? Would that help? Or have you got a bunch of slides?
About 10 or 12. So. This is good. People can't see.
How's that? Is that all right?
Yep.
Good.
So like Rob said, my dad is an interim pastor right now in Emmons, Minnesota. It's about 10 minutes south of Albert Lea, if you didn't know where that was.
Right on the border.
Yes. Yep. He is not with the ELCA. He's with a denomination called the North American Lutheran Church, the NALC. And Emmons is part of the Iowa Mission District. So he fills in when pastors leave churches in the Iowa Mission District. So he's been to a town called Greene, which is, if anybody knows Iowa, probably not. It's maybe about a half hour from Cedar Falls. So he drives a lot, comes over a lot. Emmons is about 3 hours from my hometown. So he's gone, in Lent, he's gone Wednesday through Sunday. He was born in Wilmer, Minnesota. His parents are Marlis and Elroy Schafer. For a brief, Elroy was did many jobs. He was a butcher, worked on the train, things like that. And then Marlis, my grandma, wasn't working in a nursing home. It's kind of an administrative person. Unfortunately, I never got to meet my grandpa Elroy. He passed away before I was born. He had a heart attack while working on the train and died. So for a brief period, they moved to Montana, but most of his life was in Wilmer. He went to college at Gustavus in St. Peter, and from there he went to seminary at Luther Seminary here in the Twin Cities. I think just shortly after.
When did he graduate, Paul? Do you know?
It would have been probably 83, 84, around that time.
I graduated in 79.
Yeah, so probably had a lot of the same professors you have, but I know that was very influential on him, and ever since then he's been a pastor. His first Paul came in a town called Sutton, Nebraska. It's in the very south middle of Nebraska, kind of on the Kansas border. And yeah, before we go too far into that, let me talk about my mom, because that's kind of the next part. So my mom's a 4th grade teacher at a Catholic school, even though we're all Lutheran. St. Patrick's School in Waukon. She's been a teacher forever. I don't think she's ever going to leave. I think I'm going to have to rip her out of a classroom one day when she's probably 95. So, love my mom to death. She's awesome. She was born in a town in western Nebraska. I don't know if it's necessarily a town, but it's kind of a village, a lodgepole. Her dad, Norman, was a pastor, Lutheran pastor, and her mother, Bernetta, was a school teacher. When she was maybe 2 or 3, they moved to Bennington, Nebraska, which is just a suburb of Omaha now. Growing up, whenever we'd visit family, Bennington was not a suburb of Omaha. Omaha has grown so incredibly fast in the 20 years that I've been alive, 25 years that I've been alive, that it's pretty much a suburb. So her father, Norman, actually built the church in Bennington, the Lutheran church, St. John's, and that's where my parents were married. Unfortunately, again, I never got to meet my grandpa Norman, or as we call him, Opa, German, for grandfather. So he passed away from colon cancer shortly before I was born as well. I adored my grandma, Bernetta, Oma, as we would call her. She was very awesome woman. Very caring, outgoing, loved in the community. I loved her so much, and she passed away on Christmas Day, 2015, and that was a really hard night. Christmas, celebration, Jesus is born, but I lost my grandma that night, so it was tough. But cool story about that. My cousin and his wife were expecting another child, and they hadn't told anybody, and they told her the night that she passed away. And first thing she said was, she had been in and out of consciousness, not really kind of with it, and the first thing she said was, wow, wow, wow. And shortly after that, she passed away, so it was a special moment. So those are my parents. So like I said with my dad, his first call was in Sutton, Nebraska. So that's where I was born. My parents met because my dad actually knew a pastor, Joel Schrader, which was my mom's brother, and they connected. So that's how they met. I was born in Hastings, Nebraska, which is just not too far north of Sutton, a little bit bigger of a city. Fun fact about Hastings, it's where Kool-Aid was invented. The hometown Kool-Aid. So I spent my first 4 years of life, I guess that should be 0 to 4, but I spent my first 4 years of life in Sutton. That was my first Easter.
Cool outfit.
You put it in there.
I did it to draw attention. Pay attention to the pictures. So I don't remember much about Sutton. It was always hot, southern Nebraska, a lot of storms, tornadoes, things like that.
No flooding?
No flooding. So we lived in 2 different houses. They had a parsonage that my dad lived in. He served a 3-point parish in Sutton, a country church, and then 2 churches in town. I think one was a Methodist, or they weren't all Lutheran, but such a small town that, it's hard to get more than 1 or 2 pastors to town. So he served a 3-point parish, lived in the parsonage of one of them, and he has some phenomenal stories. I wish he would write a book about all the things that old ladies would come and say, and they would come to his house and say, they would come to his
How old? Be careful, kid.
Be careful with this.
So
Cute picture. He'd write a book. I wish he would. He has a story where a lady would come to his house and tell him he's using too much electricity, or the door's open or something, and she would just walk in and
tell him that and things like that. One time he was in the shower. So she walked in and said, "You can't have the door open." He says, "I'm in the shower," and she bolted out of there, and she didn't have. So he has a lot of stories like that. But like I said, I don't remember too much about my Sutton days. We moved to a larger house that wasn't an apartment maybe when I was 1 or 2. It's all oblivious to me, but
Is the parsonage connected to the church or right
no,
next door?
as far as I remembered, it was not.
Oh.
I think it was close, but it wasn't.
Okay.
If I can picture it in my head as much as I can. Writing came on the wall that I think the churches were going to close. It's a really small town in southern Nebraska, really small. And since then, one of them has closed, a little country church. And so we decided, well, my parents decided to move. And we moved to Waukon, Iowa. Any guesses who I am in that picture?
You're the one in the bottom, middle?
Yep.
Oh, good.
I'm the best. So.
Okay.
So we moved to Waukon in 1998. I was 4, around 5. My dad became an associate pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Waukon. And that's kind of where I grew up. That's where I spent most of my years, my 20 years of life. So this is my Sunday school. I don't know. I think we were in kindergarten here. So all of these people I went to high school with and graduated with and things like that. So yeah. So to move to Waukon. So Waukon, it's about 10 hours from Sutton. So we U-hauled all of our stuff to Waukon, and we live in my parents bought a big Victorian household, so that was built in the 1800s, and so very old, hardwood floors, still original, things like that. So it has a lot of character, and yeah, so that was kind of my first big move. Out of order.
There it is.
We'll talk about this first, but so we had moved to Waukon. I think I was maybe 6. I wasn't growing. I was short. I was really short in preschool and kindergarten. They didn't know really what was going on. So we went. Rochester's not too far from Waukon, so about 2 hours north. So we went up to Mayo and met with the doctor, Dr. Zimmerman, and he was great. He had little finger puppets that he would. It's awesome when you're a kid. They diagnosed me with growth hormone deficiency. So essentially my growth plates don't work as normal. My pituitary gland doesn't make enough growth hormone to activate my growth plates, so I just wouldn't grow. I was really short. So it says steroid shots, but it was really HGH. I took human growth hormone via shot every day for about 4 years of my life. So I watched a little bit of Soren's presentation. He said he took shots every day.
Yeah.
Same thing. Shots don't bother me. I get them every day. Had them every day. So, and when you're little, it's even more scary. You know, you're 6 and you're getting shots. Luckily, it was in the fatty areas, so arms, stomach, butt, thigh, things like that. But I actually did really well on the treatment. They said it was one of the best they've ever seen responses to the treatment, and so after 4 years they decided to take me up because there are some risks taking that. Tumors and things like that can happen. So yeah, that's kind of that story. It's nothing life-threatening or anything, but it's an interesting thing, you know.
And so, Paul, in that 4 years, had you made up enough ground, so to speak, that...
Yeah, so I actually outgrew my classmates. I was taller than them by the 2nd or 3rd grade. So they didn't want me to go any longer. They thought it was enough, and I would reach normal height. So I still.
But then, did you continue to grow after
I
that?
grew a little bit in my teenage years. I haven't grown too much probably since I'm 15 or 16. Hit my ceiling there. Yeah.
Will you have any problems as you grow older?
Not that I'm aware of. I do know that some of my hormones still don't work normal.
Okay.
Things like testosterone and things like that. It doesn't, that can be a side effect of not having enough growth hormone, is that you just don't get enough of those. So, you know, there's things like that. I could have thyroid problems in the future, so, there's,
Thank you.
yeah, so. So growing up in Waukon, you can see Waukon's right, the little star, so the top blue line is the Minnesota border. So we're way up in the northeast section of Iowa. That's what road sign is you're coming in, from the west, going east.
Is that driftless? I know the
Yes.
process, it's
Yes.
driftless, okay.
Yeah, so it's driftless, and that's an interesting point. So it's driftless because the glacier's mist is part of Iowa, is part of the region.
Yeah.
They didn't flatten things out. So we have a lot of sinkholes, things like that. And it's a really, really cool region of Iowa.
So that's next to Wisconsin there too, the
Yeah,
Wisconsin
yep,
border,
yep. So the
Minnesota-Wisconsin
Yep.
border. All right.
So we're pretty close to the Mississippi River and things like that.
The area there is called the Little Switzerland of Iowa.
Yep.
Oh.
Because my first teaching place was halfway between Waterloo and Dubuque, so it was on the up and down area.
Yeah, if any of you have driven down 35 or anything like that, you know it's flat, it's boring, it's corn.
Yeah. Cornfield.
This region is completely different.
Right.
It's hills, it's valleys, it's beautiful. I encourage a drive in the fall down this area.
Good deer hunting down there?
Yes, wonderful deer hunting.
All right.
Trout. If you're trout fishing, it's got wonderful trout streams, a lot of natural springs, because the sinkholes create caves, and so there's a lot of natural groundwater. So it's a really, really beautiful part of Iowa. And it's not like the rest, which is kind of neat. So, this is just more pictures of me growing up in Waukon. So we had a neighbor girl in high school who was doing a photography class. So she had me dress up as like a cowboy and like grease and stuff like that.
A greaser?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then,
Is that a pack of cigarettes there on your?
Now we know.
it's videotaped, I can't say that's my mom.
Candy cigarette.
Yeah, there you go.
I got yelled at for that one time.
I know.
So, yeah, I grew up in Waukon. I made a lot of lifelong friends there. I have a wedding with actually this guy in September, so I'm going to be in his wedding party. Yeah, so that's me on the right.
Any brothers or sisters?
I'm an only
Okay.
child, so, yeah, should have mentioned that. It's me, I'm spoiled.
Yeah, you got a
So,
Classes.
yes, I actually wear contacts now.
Okay.
Football, we wear contacts. But this was probably second grade, I want to say. So by that time, I had grown considerably. I'm actually bending over quite a bit in that picture.
Yeah.
So I had grown considerably by then. So I love Waukon. It's a small town. It's about 4,000 people in East Iowa. Everybody knows everybody. That could be a good thing and a bad thing.
Especially when you're a pastor's kid.
Yes. You gotta be pretty perfect. So I actually didn't go to school where my mom teaches. They have tuition. It just there's only one fourth grade class. She didn't think it was smart to have me in her class, but I graded a lot of my peers' papers, math tests and things like that. So she always told me to keep quiet because a lot of them were not good. So that was always an interesting dynamic. But yeah, like I said, so I met a lot of friends. The one on this one, Ben Ewing, one of my best friends. But I also met a lot of high school friends and things like that I still maintain relationships with, and so not much to do in Waukon. There's a pool, there's a park. That's about it. Small town Iowa. So.
Where do you reside now?
I live in Woodbury.
Oh, okay.
So, yep. I moved about 2 years ago. 2.5, 2. So, yep. So, I have, hobbies, interests, just like every person. I love sports. Pastor Bob said, here's my Milwaukee hat. I have maybe 4 or 5 of those at home. So, love baseball. Baseball is probably my passionate sport to watch.
So-
Explain why you were a Milwaukee fan.
Yeah, so growing up in that little northeast section of Iowa, we didn't get the Twins or the Cubs on TV. So our local baseball team was the Brewers, and so I started watching them in 2008, hooked onto them. That's kind of when they were starting to get good. They had been really bad in the early 2000s, and that started when they kind of got good. And so I latched onto a lot of those younger players that they had, and really became a pretty passionate fan. And then I went on a trip with one of my high school friends to his grandparents' house near Milwaukee, and they took us to a game, and that's kind of where it all fell in love right there. So, love the Brewers. But I'm a sports fanatic. I love any sport. If you can sit me down in front of the TV, I'll pretty much watch anything that has sports. I haven't gotten into hockey yet, which is weird because I live here, but basketball, baseball, football, big Packer fan. I don't know if I should say that loud.
They're our neighbors.
Big Nebraska fan. Growing up in Nebraska, you're born to bleed red. So there's no getting around that. So big Nebraska fan in college. And then I love to golf. Golf is one of my favorite sports to play. I grew up, I played all the sports, Little League, I did soccer, I did ball, I did basketball. But my dad took me out golfing, and I instantly just fell in love, and I was pretty good at it. Not to brag or anything, but I won a lot of the kiddie tournaments in walk-on growing up. I have maybe 4 or 5 trophies of me winning my age division and things like that. So I really latched on to golf, and I still play to this day pretty actively. And then Legos. I love to build Legos. Really, it's every Christmas my parents get me a Lego set, and so this was not this past Christmas, but the Christmas before they got me from Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
BB-8. It'd be like R2-D2, the new R2-D2. And so that's about a 1,400 piece Lego set.
How big is that?
Yeah, so it's probably about this high, this wide.
Huh.
Yeah. It took me I'd always sit down and do them Christmas night. That's just one of my traditions. I can't help it. I can't wait.
Dan Erickson got Legos for his birthday yesterday.
Yeah.
About that size.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I loved it. I had Legos growing up. I just built anything and everything. I had Hot Wheels, things like that. But Legos were my favorite, and so I have a little collection of Star Wars Legos right now. I have about 5 years worth of Legos going on. So.
No, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So.
Is that a catfish that you're holding?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a bullhead.
Giant bullhead.
Yeah. We weren't looking for it. It kind of latched on, but it gave me about a 10-15 minute fight.
Cool.
I was pretty gassed after I pulled that in.
Yeah.
That's actually at a Bible camp in Wisconsin, near Grantsburg. I don't know if anybody knows where Grantsburg.
Yeah.
So this is a Luther Point Bible camp. Every summer, my family, the 3 of us would go spend 4th of July week at there. They didn't have kids, and most of the family cabins didn't have anybody in them. So we had access to a pontoon. They have a lake. We got fishing license for a week, and just enjoyed a week on the lake.
Yeah.
So fishing. I haven't gone out too much lately. Just not a whole lot of time to do that, but.
The water's not soft yet either.
I've been ice fishing once. I don't really want to do it again. It was pretty miserable. So, yeah. So that's kind of my hobbies and interests. That is probably the biggest fish I've caught. Unfortunately, we didn't want it. It's like kind of gross, but
Catch and release.
Yep. But yeah, I caught pike and bass and things like that. So we did that up until 2 years ago. We stopped going. They kind of changed management, and they didn't really let people out on pontoons anymore. We just didn't want to. We didn't like the direction the camp was going, so we didn't. And me living up here now, it's just kind of hard. So yeah, that's kind of my hobbies and interests. I will add. I didn't add a slide for this, but I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm really proud to be an Eagle Scout. We had a troop in Waukon. It was about we had a troop in Waukon. It was about maybe 20 of us, and there were about 6 or 7 of us in our grade, and we all became Eagle Scouts.
Wow.
That's
So,
big.
yeah.
That's great.
So I'm pretty proud of that. And actually, my Eagle Scout project was at St. Patrick's School my mom taught. So they had their school is the first high school in town. It was the first high school, so it is old. It is probably I don't even know when they would have used it as a high school. They stopped using it as a high school, I think, in the 1960s, 70s. And so they had kind of locker rooms and stuff on both sides down by the gym. And they were old and dungy and really moldy and gross, and so that's where they were storing all their PE equipment. And so my project was to actually kind of flip that room and make it an accessible and good PE storage room and things like that. So we reused a lot of existing lockers, things like that were in the school that they weren't using, put them in there, painted, got rid of the mold, did things like that, and just to this day I still go in there and they've kept it beautifully clean, and it makes me proud that they've done that. That they, that what I did actually meant something to the PE teacher and things like that. So, so that's kind of my hobbies and interests. So college, I went to Lutheran College, as Pastor Bob said, in Decorah, Iowa, which is about 20 minutes to the west of Waukon. So if we go back to that picture, it would be right about here in Winnebago County. So I went to college, and I was becoming a doctor. That was all I wanted to be growing up. I wanted to be a doctor. I loved watching the doctor shows on like TLC, like Untold Stories of the ER, things like that. I loved all the interactions I had with their patients. I loved being able to help people where I could, things like that. And so I was so set on becoming a doctor. When I went to my orientation, the professor that I got for a mentor was a chemistry professor. And so a lot of what you need for the MCAT, you actually need probably more chemistry than you need actually biology for the MCAT, which is, if anybody doesn't know, it's an entrance exam to get into a medical school. And so I started he advised that I took a class before I take my biology class, because a lot of times they overlapped, and down the road I learned that the way the biology teachers teach general chemistry is just awful, and it confuses a lot of the students. And so I was very thankful that he told me to take chemistry first. And so I actually fell in love with that general chemistry class that I took. I loved the professors that I had the first year I was at Luther. And so I decided to switch. I was no longer going to be biology, I was going to be chemistry, but I still was going to be a doctor. Fast forward 2 more years, I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. I really didn't like I still liked all of my professors I had in chemistry, but I didn't really have a passion for it. Crap. Tuition's $42,000 a year, I'm 3 years into this degree, what am I going to do? So I finished it. I didn't waver on what I started. I knew that I would get a lab job or something, down the line, and I would make it work, and maybe I would save enough money to go into what I really was passionate about, and that was actually computers and programming and things like that. And that came because I worked at the technology help desk at Luther. And so, so that's kind of what my passion turned to 2 or 3 years into college. I took a Latin class. We required that Luther's a liberal arts college. They required a language, and I didn't want to speak a language for a grade, so I took Latin. There's no speaking requirement in Latin, but I won a button doing something, vocabulary or something, and this translates into always wear your underwear.
Yeah, I was going to say, always wear your underwear.
No idea why. Whatever.
Why don't you wear it?
Underwear?
The button.
Oh, the button.
I didn't say them.
Underwear singular. While I was at Luther, I had
like I said, I love golf. I was going to try out for the golf team. Realized I was not good enough to make a golf team in college. But I got placed in the athletes dorm at college. So a lot of my friends were athletes at Luther, baseball players, basketball players. I really latched onto the baseball team. And so I had kind of worked with them my sophomore and junior year as kind of a volunteer. I helped out at practice, showed up to games, did kind of whatever they needed me to do. And then my senior year, I actually got a K2 manager position on the baseball team. And so that involved, again, helping out at practices, throwing batting practice, things like that. But I also ran the baseball Twitter account. So I would tweet out live scores and updates and things like that. The baseball team won conference that year, and we got to play in the NCAA tournament, so that was pretty special. And we got to actually play it in lacrosse, which, if you remember the picture, is really close to my hometown. So my mom and dad actually got to come up and watch the baseball team a couple times. That's, just fed more into my passion about baseball. And so I still have friends on the baseball team that maybe quit their sophomore and junior year just with class load at Luther, because it is, it's a liberal arts school, it's pretty intensive, and so I'm still friends with a lot of them today. So
Was Luther a good choice for you?
I love Luther. It was actually the only school I applied. I never visited. We had been there on field trips and things like that, so my dad was really pushing for Gustavus. I wonder why. I kept telling him I was going to go to St. Olaf. That didn't make him happy. At first, I was really not set on Luther. He kind of put it in my mind that you should check out Luther. It's a good school. I was intent on going to the University of Iowa. They have a great medical school, and that would have been the path there. I visited Iowa, actually, so I did visit another school, but it wasn't an actual official visit. I visited a friend at Iowa, and kind of went to a couple classes with him and realized that you had to ride the bus from your dorm to the campus, and I hated that. I didn't like how big it was. I didn't like how big the classes were. I hated Iowa after I left. So I love Luther. It's more of a high school setting. You have maybe, in my last year with my core chemistry classes, I maybe had 6 or 7 in a class. So, you really got that one-on-one with the teacher if you need help, things like that. So, I love Luther.
How many would graduate a year from Luther?
So Luther has an enrollment of about 2,000.
Okay.
So I graduated, I think, with 480, around that number.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the larger schools in their conference. So, yeah.
It does have a great reputation.
Yes.
Outstanding.
Yeah. A lot of kids from the cities come down, it's a lot of, their parents went there, so they go there, things like that, so.
Emily Trigestead is also a graduate of Luther College.
And Soren, of course.
And Soren, yeah.
And Signe Oslin was looking at that between Luther and Moorhead, and just went to Concordia. So it does have a good reputation.
Yep. So, Luther's kind of famous for their Luther Bell in the middle of campus. It's kind of a touristy thing at Luther. You take a picture with the bell. But that's kind of right in the middle of campus. And campus is just, it's in Decorah. Decorah's maybe twice the size of Waukon, so maybe 8,000 to 10,000. But Luther is off, kind of on its own. It's not in town, so it's kind of all spread out. And it's just, you get kind of like maybe a little bit of a bigger campus feel when you're there. It's beautiful. I love Luther. So there we go. Work. So I got my chemistry degree, and I didn't know what to do. I interviewed at lab jobs. I didn't get any. I had a position lined up in Omaha for maybe a temp lab job in agricultural chemistry, things like that. But it would have been only for the harvesting season. I'm not moving out to Omaha for 3 months for a job. So I didn't know what to do. I was pretty lost. I had kept interviewing for lab jobs, and there's not a lot around my area, so it was hard to find positions.
And so I actually didn't have a job out of college for almost a year, and that was one of the hardest points in my life. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was living with my parents. I felt horrible. I was down that why am I not getting jobs? Why are these people not giving me positions? You know, I think I'm pretty nice, pretty good, pretty trustworthy. Eagle Scout, you know, what's wrong with me type of thing. I reached out to a college chemistry friend of mine who also, and he recommended Pace Analytical in the Twin Cities. And so I reached out to them and looked on their website, and they had a position called an IT regulatory analyst, and the qualification was a Bachelor of Arts in Chemistry. I'm like, wow, this seems perfect. IT and chemistry degree, awesome. This can't get any better for me. And so I reached out to them, and I interviewed on the phone the first time, because it's a three-hour drive up here. That's kind of pointless to interview the first time in person. So I interviewed on the phone, and they wanted me to come up for an interview a couple weeks later. And I was all set to go up to my interview, and we got a blizzard. I had to push it back a day. So I left at 5:30 the next morning to get up for like a 9 a.m. interview at Pace. And there was still snow on the road. It probably wasn't smart for me to go that next day. But I was desperate. I wanted a job. My money was running out. Luther was going to start asking for money and not donation-wise. So I drove up and I met. So when it says servicing 3M, I work on 3M's campus. I don't technically work for 3M. I'm employed by Pace Analytical. I get my paychecks from them. But I work with a lot of the 3M information specialists. So I wouldn't technically consider it an IT job. I would more consider it an information specialist job. So I met with the Pace manager, and I met with the 3M manager, and he's actually a Luther graduate, and he knew my roommate my senior year. Well, so small world.
Yep.
Using my Luther connections to my fullest advantage, and I was hired. I was going to start mid-February, and then I had a cousin overdose in Colorado, and so we went out for the funeral, and that delayed when I started for a week. Yeah, that was tough. I didn't know too much. They had always lived in Arizona, Colorado. It would have been on my dad's side. It would have been his sister. So, his sister's son. So, yeah, that was tough. So I started a week or so later than I had anticipated, and I've been there ever since. So what the heck does IT regulatory specialist mean? I'm sure a lot of you are wondering. That doesn't make sense. So 3M, makes a lot of products. Command, Scotchgard, Scotch-Brite, anything and everything you can think of in your home, car, whatever. And everything that they make needs to have some kind of regulatory document with it, whether that's a safety data sheet, a regulatory data sheet, an article information sheet, an article information letter, anything. And so my job is to make sure that all of their regulatory documents are compliant with regulations worldwide. So Brexit has a pretty big implication to 3M if it ever happens, because they would then split off from the EU regulations, and they would have a set of their own regulations. So we would have to go into probably overdrive to change all the UK documents that we have to comply with all of their new regulations if they come up with any. I would assume they would take on most of what the EU already has and just kind of copy and paste. But so that's something we have to monitor. Changes like that. And 3M is global. They have things in Japan, Singapore, Brazil, Argentina, Canada, the U.S. obviously, Europe, Russia, everywhere pretty much. So
Can you give us an idea of something that might be looked at when they're doing, it's like, is the glue soluble?
So that's not part of my,
Okay.
so 3M has, so what they do is they have, chemists in the lab
Yeah.
that do, tests and make the product and things like that. And they'll give that information, or they'll do studies or whatever to get that kind of information to what 3M calls a product responsibility liaison, and they are the ones that actually enter the information. So we have an application called the Chemical Data Management System, CDMS, that that the PRLs will enter that information in, and so then we alter that system when it needs to be altered, so that it prints the correct information in the correct sections for the correct thing. So we're more on the IT, information systems side of things. We don't really do a lot of with the chemistry necessarily. So, but I don't know if anybody has seen a safety data sheet or an SDS, but I do have an example of a Scotchgard product. It didn't switch.
Those are those things we always throw away in our packaging box, right?
Recycle.
Yeah.
Living life on the edge, okay?
Yeah, okay.
You can just walk them.
So that's kind of small, but these are what we maintain. So they're they can be 9 pages, they can be, it doesn't matter the pages, but each safety data sheet is 16 sections. So the first section, it identifies the product. And this is a Scotchgard leather restorer that they sell from their home care division. But it has things like an emergency telephone number if a child ingests it. They have stock numbers, so if you need to look up this SDS on their website, you can use that information to get it. That should also be on the packaging. And then, section 2 and things like that. So it's 16 sections of a lot of text. But every little table, sentence, everything like that is in our chemical data management system. And so if they need to change something like the component of this product are in compliance with the chemical notification requirements of TSCA. If that statement needs to change, we have to go in and make a change to that statement on our back end of our system, on our database. So every sentence, every piece of text, every number, everything you see here comes from our chemical data management system, and we have to alter that to comply with worldwide regulations. So we have SDSs in all kinds of different languages. So we have Russian, we have Chinese, we have Japanese, we have Spanish, Canadian English.
So that's when we, we heard when we get these things on a new product, English isn't the only language.
Correct.
And they print it all on one thing and we get it all.
Correct.
Okay.
So when you see things on the back of a product, that's usually our label.
Okay.
So and we also are in charge of those coming from our system. And so yeah, it's a lot of work. It's always busy. It's always changing regulations. There's a big one in Europe right now that's coming down January 1st of 2020 about poison control and things like that, and what we have to disclose on our safety data sheets. And so,
Paul, are you responsible for the accuracy of the information on
No.
those sheets?
nope. So that would be the PRL would be responsible for that in the division.
The sheet itself is
The
used,
product responsibility liaison.
the sheet itself is used to make sure that you're in compliance if you're gonna use that product in certification, or?
So it's more of an information type document. So if a child ingests it or a person ingests it, the doctor would have access to this information. And they can go E3. This is your composition information. That's part of the reason why chemistry is such a big, important part for doctors.
Tells you what chemicals in it are.
Yeah,
in
yep.
whatnot.
A lot of it, things like, they call it like an emulsifier plus a fragrance.
they can actually tell you what's in it. They don't want to, just for business purposes. But usually things like that aren't very hazardous. Your hazards are going to come from things like your hydrocarbons or your alkenes and things like that are pretty bad. So yeah, this is what I do on a day-to-day basis. I make sure these are look good and that there's no issues with the system and things like that.
Paul, how big is PACE? How many employees?
PACE has so PACE started as it's an environmental laboratory first, and they got into this contract work because environmental, it's not a steady business. It's not very, how should I put it? It fluctuates. So this is pretty steady for them. They sign 3M signs a contract and pays them a set amount of money every year. This is a large part of their business, how they stay in the black most of the time. I would say they probably have 200,000 employees across the U.S., maybe 300,000.
Headquarters?
Here in Minneapolis. Yep.
So, is it better for you to work for PACE, or is it better for you to work for 3M?
3M.
3M?
Yep, but it's cheaper for 3M. I hire people from PACE. So.
And there's always a possibility of them hiring you.
Correct. So a lot of the people in the department that I work with that work 3M started with PACE.
Yeah.
So 3M likes to hire within. So this is kind of a way for 3M to vet you, make sure you're good at what you do.
Right.
Cheaper for them.
Right.
So when there's a position open, you apply, but so hopefully there's something opening soon. But I love my employees. I love who I work with every day. It's always changing. It's never the same. Each day is always different. It's challenging mentally to think of, because there's always something wrong with the system. It's on a computer. They never work perfectly.
Right.
So there's that investigative part of me that likes to investigate
it's not
things
me.
like that.
Well, that's the exception.
Good to know it's not him.
Do you get more training from PACE or from 3M, or are you adequately?
So the training on the system comes from 3M. It comes from people in our department. But you don't learn everything about the system for a year. It took me a year to learn. I know now, and I still don't know probably a quarter of what the system can do. It's so big, which is challenging every day. There's always something new to learn, and I love that. There are challenges. I talked about some of the rewarding aspects. It makes me think. It makes me learn. It keeps my brain going every day. But there's challenges. I work in science. That doesn't always align with church. There's a lot of. There's no God. God doesn't exist. I'm probably one of the few people of strong faith in my department. They don't go to church. They don't believe. Things like that. They're science. Some of that's their background and how they were brought up and things like that, and so that's a challenge.
Yeah.
But I know that that Jesus came and died for me, and that no matter what everybody else has or believes, I have a belief in Jesus and God, and I think they can coexist. I think He gave us the ability to find science and use science to better our lives and better lives of other people. And so I use that. That's how I combat that challenge. I use my God-given talents to help others and make sure that when a kid ingests Scotch Guard leather cleaner, that they can go to the SDS and find what they need to make that kid better. That's the main challenge that I face every day. It's more of a personal, mental challenge. I don't typically bring it up and combat, and go after people like you maybe I should tell them why they should believe, and maybe I should be more outgoing that way. And maybe that's another personal goal of mine, or mental challenge of mine, to be able to give the aspect of my faith to someone else, or let them experience that. So, that's kind of all I have.
Paul, I have a question.
That's an extra question.
Perfect time.
Hey, look at that. Time for questions.
How does that come up? I mean, how would you, I mean, in corporate settings that I've been in, you know, your faith doesn't even always come up.
Yeah.
Unless I bring it up. I mean, it
Right.
doesn't even come up.
Right.
How does it-
So one of the family leaders was brought up in a very conservative Christian home, and it was very, you know, he didn't enjoy it. It wasn't a good experience for him, and so he brings that up a lot. He doesn't like his parents. He doesn't like what they forced on him and things like that. And you know, that can be tough, because I know growing up I didn't have that. I didn't share that experience. I grew up in a very conservative Christian home too, but I didn't share those same experiences. And I don't know what's different. Maybe they took it too far on the discipline side, things like that. It doesn't actively come up, but I just know that it's something it's a challenge in science, and you know, there's always that disconnect between the two sides. They don't want to overlap, and I think there's plenty of room for that.
There's room for overlap.
The other day I read Dear Abby. You can tell you're retired and read Dear Abby, but the one letter was from an atheist, and was very upset that someone said Gesundheit. And so, do you see, you know, if someone sneezes at your work, do you say that? Are people, do even people consider that? It's just, it just really hit me, because that's a normal reaction.
Yeah, God
In
bless
fact,
you.
Ray sneezed this morning, and I said Gesundheit. But that's what we, you know, when it's ingrained in you. So, I guess it's something you have to face, that the rest of the world does not want this God to bless them.
Right. And a lot of it, when I sneeze, it's bless you.
Yeah,
It's not
okay.
God bless you.
Parents,
Parents, family, it's always God bless you.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I think it's, when you get a hold of somebody that, and religion does come up, you don't jam it down their throat. You
Right.
give it to them a little bit.
Right.
When I was 15 years old, I worked part-time in a packing house, and I had this black guy, was kind of a rounder, and I get talking religion with him. He'd bring it up once in a while, and I don't think I ever converted him, but
Right.
that same with you, no matter what station in life you are, if you know, feel that way, and somebody brings it up, then you go in, you don't,
Then you,
Right.
you talk, and you don't jam it down their throat.
Right.
well, I don't wanna make this about me, but I'm gonna interject. Michelle has always asked me,
Look at the camera.
how did talking about church or choir or whatever come up with your customers? Well, I just bring it up. I tell them about my week or whatever's happening, and that I sing in choir, and I'm gonna be busy this, and that opens the conversation,
Sure.
and, you know.
Yeah, and a lot of
That's great.
that conversation comes up, what did you do this weekend, or what do you have going on tonight? One night, I'm going to a late ministry, you know, oh, good for you, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
I found one way that people would react if they would tell me about something going on in their life, and I would say, pray for them. And you could tell, that kind of opened the door if they
Yeah.
wanted to talk, and it wouldn't really be at that time they'd
Right.
say thank you, and
Right.
another time they would feel more open to that. So I easily will say that to someone that.
What brought you to Cross Lutheran? I mean, why did you stay?
Yeah, so, going back a little ways, we didn't stay at St. John's, it was maybe, I think I was in third grade, that ended. There's political stuff in church too.
Yeah.
It doesn't exclude, you know. There was a lot of disagreement between my dad and the lead pastor, and so we left. He did more mediation work after that, and then kind of bounced around as an interim with the North American Lutheran Church. And So, going from St. John's, we found a country church called Old East Paint Creek Lutheran Church, and very close with each other, very family oriented, very, you know, they have one of my favorite things each week that they have is my pastor came up with an idea for a children's sermon that was called Stump the Pastor Bucket. And so he would give an ice cream bucket to a kid each week and told them to put an item in it and bring it back next week. And he would have to relate whatever that item was to God. And so, you know, it's always family-oriented things like that. And so when I moved up here, I was looking for a place to worship, and I tried a place in Maplewood, and it was not what I was looking for. It was, I didn't like it. It didn't vibe with me very well. And so I kept looking on the internet, and I found this, and you know, I was open to trying different places, so I came and immediately got that family vibe. So, and you know, a lot of that is you calling me the very next day. I've never experienced that in my life, and it was incredible to me. And so, that's how I came, and that's how I stayed.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that note, he was, taught Sunday school the first half of this year, and Kirby was one of the students. Kirby loved having Paul as a teacher, and he never once said, "Do I have to go to Sunday school today?" Which I do hear sometimes. He really enjoyed having Paul as a teacher, so kudos to you, young man.
Yes, thank you.
Dave Olson had, did you have?
Yeah, just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Since we've moved and have well water, do you know, is there an actual connection between PFCs and cancer causing, or?
I would, anytime you say there's a link between something and cancer, you have to be very careful.
Mhm.
Always call it a correlation. You can't ever determine that it causes cancer because it's not humane to do those tests. I would say there's probably a pretty good likelihood that it does have a correlation with cancer. That's something 3M's trying to combat, but because obviously they use that, you know, as did a lot of the industrial companies in the 60s and 70s. It was,
Paul, we appreciate what you've shared with us today. I was reminded, especially as you got to the end of what you shared with us, of a seminary professor of mine who was serving a summer call out in the western part of the country. And he was working with, or there were geologists in the congregation who were fundamentalists, meaning they believed that the world is 6,000 years old on Sundays.
Yep.
And, but Monday through Friday, they believe the world is billions of years, or millions, or whatever the number is. And my seminary professor said to them, how do you keep those two together? And the guy said, I don't. I have a Sunday life, and I have a work life, and a work faith, and a Sunday faith. So I appreciate it, and I suspect I'm not the only one, when you talk about how these are integrated, not that you have a split personality.
right.
And I think that that would give a number of us a great comfort to know that you're in your spot. There are others in similar spots who bring not only a belief in the Creator of all, who sent His Son to die for us, like you say, but that's a part of how you look at your job, and that it's not just about chemicals or IT, it's finally about that child at the end of the process who might need exactly what you provided.
Right.
And I think that, again, when we think about callings, think of the diversity, but all of the ways that God calls people to serve Him and one another, which is really where it's at. And so I'm very grateful. I think we are very grateful for what you shared with us today. And like Michelle just said, or whoever, we're glad that you're here. Thank you. Next week, in our final my calling presentation. Jamie Lund will be sharing with us about her calling. Jamie is a nurse at, I think she's at United Hospital. And I said to her that we'll certainly be interested in what you might choose to share about your work, but there might be a handful of us that are curious about what it was like to give birth to a little girl at 20-some weeks, and then to see her almost every day, if not literally every day, for several months while she was growing into a healthy enough little girl to bring her home. And Amy's comment, and I mean, I can just hear her saying this, is, I was thinking you might say that, or something like that, you know. So, I mean, next week it'll be completely different. And yet, how inspiring is that for each of us, that we each have a story to tell, and that God is at work in us, for us, and through us. So, Paul, again, thanks very much for today.
Thanks, Paul.
They have